All right, we're recording. Welcome, everybody. This is the biweekly SIG VMware meeting. Today is February 28th, 2019, and we're going to get started, as usual, with the community updates from Steve.
Okay, to start the community updates, we followed through with what we talked about at the last meeting, a talk proposal for KubeCon China. What we're going with is the option of a combined longer intro and deep dive, and we're going to cover the issues with both the cloud provider and the storage plugin moving out of tree, the out of tree cloud provider along with CSI, what this means to users. Getting into the deep dive portion of this, we're going to cover configuration and then finally the issues involved with migration if you're currently deployed using the legacy forms of cloud provider and the in-tree storage plugin. Moving on, monitoring what's going on in the Slack channel and mailing list. There have been a number of inquiries from users asking about the status of volume resize support. That would be a scenario, a use case where you might deploy a stateful app like a database using a persistent volume, have it fill the volume and want to grow it potentially online. Is there anybody here from Dev on the call who can maybe add some color to whatever the status is on this, whether there's active work on this now and what the expected delivery date might be?
Well, it's my understanding that the volume resize stuff for CSI, it's in the spec, but they haven't cut a new version of it. So, you know, until they tag a new version with that functionality built in, you're not going to likely see anything until, you know, that happens, right?
Yeah. Now, for the legacy entry, there actually is in the Kubernetes documentation a list of storage providers that already support it. And I'm not sure whether CSI is in a lesser state than that, where those particular storage plugins regressed and don't support it anymore. But maybe that's the case. I'm not contending to be an authority on it myself. Anyway, David, you're saying that you don't feel for the out-of-tree CSI that this could be built out yet?
No, not until they actually tag an update with that functionality into the CSI spec. I know in the mailing list, actually just a couple days ago, sometime this week, I believe, I think actually someone from Mesosphere had called out asking for a new tag for CSI because there hasn't been a release for some time. And so if they do, you know, decide to actually tag a new release of the spec, and, you know, then you'll probably see some of these other plugins, including ours, maybe start to implement that. But until that really happens, we're basically, we're effectively just waiting for that formal definition. Okay.
It might be useful for somebody to go over into the Kubernetes Slack on the VMware SIG channel and maybe put a link to that CSI activity so that users are aware that this is projected to be delivered at some point in the future, but not there yet.
Yeah, right now, I mean, there's not even consensus about when they want to tag, you know, or even a date on that. So I'm not sure when that's going to happen.
Do you think it'd be possible to write something like a blog on how to at least do this manually? I mean, I can see that Kubernetes is going out there with this story that Kubernetes is ready and usable for stateful workloads, but this scenario where they'd fill up a hard disk and not want to start over, or, you know, take a database backup and recover from it or something ugly like that, is going to be hitting people. If there's even some way to manually do it, I'm suspecting that'd be useful to people.
Yeah, I'm sure it'd be useful. I just, you know, I don't know if we could find someone who could look at that or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I can post some information about what the status of the CSI spec is, and kind of like what's going on. But yeah, having like an offline type solution, yeah, it could be beneficial, especially when, like you're saying, as people approach full, like what the heck am I going to do, right?
Yeah, it seems to me like if somebody can write it automated underneath the CSI framework, you should also be able to do it manually. I mean, in order to write the code to do it programmatically, there must be some mechanism that whereby you could do it by hand.
Yeah, it's definitely true. I mean, and then I think the real tricky part would probably be not the volume, the resize of the disk itself. It's probably the, expanding the file system to include that space, right?
Right. I suspect the manual part might involve something as, I don't know, labor intensive, shall we say, as shutting down the VM, then maybe attaching the volume to another one where you could extend the file system if that was necessary, then reattaching it to the original. But I'm just speculating here.
Yeah, we definitely need someone to take a look at that. I agree.
The other thing is, I suppose if you could get a command line prompt into something like a Postgres database server, you could shut down the database and extend it manually. But just some kind of instruction manual on how you'd go about it might be useful. Okay, let's move on. The final topic for community is that, we would like to get some relevant future presentations at these SIG meetings for users. And I'm opening this up with a request that if anybody else has any ideas on topics that we could put on the table that would be of interest to the user community, I'm potentially willing to, if somebody nominates some of these topics, I'm potentially willing to prepare a presentation myself or to recruit outside speakers. But I'm hoping some of you might have some ideas on things that might be relevant to the user community. That would be people running Kubernetes on top of VMware infrastructure.
I have one. I think I mentioned last time that Cluster API has added kind as a bootstrap cluster if you're using Cluster API in the self-service model. So just demonstrating the using kind as the bootstrap cluster might be interesting for the community, for the user.
Okay, that sounds like a good one. I know personally in the last week I went and played around with it, but I didn't really do it on vSphere. I did it on VMware Workstation inside of a Ubuntu VM. But suppose what might be a little different about doing it using kind on vSphere is perhaps you could take it to somehow consume vSphere storage once you did it.
Oh, I haven't done anything that advanced, but I can actually run the cluster cuddle with a kind, and it's really cool and really nice.
Okay.
It would be a very, very short demo.
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't really take that long to boot it up.
No.
Okay, anybody else got anything? That's a great idea. Thanks, Luke. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll turn it back to you, Fabio, to cover the active project status.
Sure. I just wanted to expand a little bit on what you were saying before about asking for topics for user, kind of end user type of session or presentation. And there, we talked about this before a few times. There is an active proposal currently being worked on in SIG Cloud Provider to fold the active provider SIGs into SIG Cloud Provider. So the idea is that we, ideally at some point in the future, there's no timeline defined yet, but at some point we would like to turn the SIGs, the provider specific SIGs as is, or vendor specific SIG like SIG VMware, SIG AWS, SIG OpenStack and others, into more of a user-oriented group where people can discuss more end user-oriented topics. Well, the development work can shift towards the umbrella SIGs. One of them is SIG Cloud Provider, the other one is SIG Cluster Lifecycle, and so on. So it's, if you're interested in having this more end user focused presentation and so on, reach out to me and Steve. We want to test some some different type of meetings for the next meeting for SIG VMware to see if this new model can fit better for the VMware community. That said, let's go into the cloud provider updates. So cloud provider has seen, the in-tree provider has seen some movement. I think we discussed last time, there was a patch being merged for supporting the other MAC address that are supporting vSphere. That patch actually led into 2 other patches because apparently the first one was fixing some of the use cases, but not all of them. That patch, those 2 patches, there's 3 patches in total. All of them are in 1.14, and they were backported into 1.13 and 1.12. 1.13.4 was actually tagged today, and it contains all the patches. So the only one that is currently being cut and does not have all the patches is 1.11.8. There was a delay because of an approval process that took a little longer than we expected, and unfortunately, we did not make the deadline that was on Tuesday, and the patch was only the PR was only approved today, and it did not make it to 1.11.8. So if you're running on 1.11 and you're running the in-tree vSphere cloud provider, do not update to 1.11.8. Just stick to 1.11.7, or just update to 1.12 or 1.13 or 1.14 will be released. So do not use 1.11.8. In my work, the only use case that is not covered is if you're using Flannel as your network overlay. If you're using Flannel, 1.11.8, it will not work. So please do not use it. Another update that was merged for 1.14, and we were trying to backport to 1.13.4, but we did not make it, is the support for zones in when deploying storage. And this is still for in-tree cloud provider. So that support was merged, and it will be there in 1.14, but unfortunately the backport to 1.13 did not make the cut for 1.13.4, which was released today. So it will make it to 1.13.5 when it will be released. That's pretty much it for the cloud provider. The other 3 cloud provider did not see any updates since 2 weeks ago, unless there is something that has changed from that. David, do you have anything to add for a cloud provider?
Just that there was a bunch of unit tests that were added, Go tests, just to verify functionality. That actually got merged, I think, yesterday. But yeah, basically the tests cover functionality, both CSI and CCM use, but it covers a lot of the way we search and look up stuff. So we have a lot better coverage now in our tests.
Awesome. That's it for cloud provider.
Fabio, I have a question.
Sure.
Fabio, this is Farhan. Yeah, I have a question for the cloud provider. So what's the current status of the out of 3? Do we consider that alpha, beta, GA?
So currently, the out of 3 cloud provider is still considered alpha, but we're probably going to have a release that is going to be considered beta in probably in conjunction with 1.14. So when 1.14 is out, we're going to tag a new version for both cloud provider and CSI at the same level as beta versions. And this is going to be in a couple of weeks from now.
Awesome. And the GA plan is 1.16, 15, 16?
The plan is to have it, yes, in a couple of releases from 1.14. So yes, the plan is to have it in 1.16. I think it has, right now, we're still trying to figure out what will be the best way forward in terms of maintenance of both the cloud provider and the CSI plugin. So I don't have a clear answer for that yet, but the plan is to have it GA before the end of the year.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So next one is Cluster API. I don't have anything from the Cluster API front. Look, you have anything on Cluster API?
Cluster API for vSphere has been pretty quiet as we focus our attention on Cluster API main repo. We've been adding a couple of bug fixes and updates to the tests for the OVA, but outside of that, it's been quiet. I think I'm getting the feeling that it might pick up very soon. There is one thing I have to let the community know about. So the current repo currently works with Customized version 1. Customized version 2, a very recent update, does not work with the recent repo. And I discovered that yesterday, and I also discovered that another person from the internal to VMware discovered that recently too and wrote up an issue. So I'm hoping that that person also submits a fix. It's not a big change, but it does require some investigation. It's part of the build process, so we need to fix this.
I think I've seen a PR coming in. I think actually we reviewed it. Who do you know?
Both Fabio and me already added the LGTM to that, and it's going to fix that. Because similarly, I already fixed on the Cluster API main repo.
Oh, okay, I see that. Okay. I did not see that. Yes.
Which is happened last week. I just didn't have enough time to kind of work on the vSphere repo after that. But yeah, I think that the PR is already there and ready for merge.
Okay, I just wanted to look through this because I was actually reading up on changes to customize V2 this morning to see what needs to be changed, but I guess Yang has already made the changes, so that's great.
Awesome. All right, that's all for Cluster API. Last one on the list is CSI. I don't have any update coming from me directly for CSI. I don't know, David, if you have anything on CSI.
Yeah, just a couple things. Or a few things. Yeah, like I said earlier, Go tests were added for CSI. So, and that was the merge, I think, last week. And so we have a lot better test coverage so that we can actually confidently move to a beta. The end-to-end tests, I think Travis is going to start next week, mainly because it was planned on doing it this week, but because Andrew Cutts is out on personal stuff, he's going to tackle it next week with Andrew. And then I picked up and started just now, started looking at the migration path from the in-tree to out-of-tree. So I just started looking at that stuff right now. So I should hopefully maybe have a little more detail and information, come in the coming weeks.
Awesome.
That will be super helpful for us because, I might be concerned about how we're going to deal with that. So we have some kind of instructions or, manual or automated to do that migration is going to be super helpful. So thank you.
My understanding, Farhan, is that there's a shared document that outlines the migration path from in-tree to out-of-tree for volumes. And that document, I think it's still in flux a little bit, but mostly done, or if not already set in stone. And I think that the idea here is that we have to implement a way to make the transition from in tree to out of tree as smooth as possible, with basically picking up volumes that were used by the in tree provider with the out of tree provider.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the update, David. That's all I have this week for the active projects update. I think we have no outstanding item in the agenda for discussion, but I just put an open mic discussion item here if anybody wants to bring up something. And if not, there's always the option of giving you guys back almost 40 minutes of your time.
Actually, guys, I had to drop off. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, Luke. Anyone? All right. Going once.
Okay, thanks to the note takers, we and Loke, who just dropped off.
Going once. Twice. Nothing. So I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.